Suburban life was supposed to be serene, a gentle breeze through the trees, the distant hum of lawnmowers, and the occasional laughter of children playing tag. It was the kind of place where time seemed to stretch lazily, like a cat basking in a sunbeam. But beneath this tranquil veneer, our neighborhood had its undercurrents, and at the center of them was Karen. Karen, with her blonde bob that barely moved in the wind, had a way of making the air tense with her presence. She was the head of the Homeowners Association, a title she wore like a crown, scrutinizing every imperfection from behind her black sunglasses. Her gaze was as sharp as the scissors she used to clip her rose bushes, and her penchant for rules was legendary. It all started with a letter, an official-looking envelope with my name scrawled in an elegant script. Inside, a notice of violation. I'd been fined for excessive wind noise supposedly emanating from my property. The accusation was absurd. I lived alone, with no wind chimes or howling dogs, just me, the whispering trees, and the occasional chatter of raccoons raiding my garbage cans. I read the letter twice, the words fluttering like autumn leaves in my mind. A fine for wind noise, an offense as intangible as the breeze itself. Karen had outdone herself this time. Of course, I didn't rush to anger. Instead, I considered the situation while sipping my morning coffee, watching as the steam curled upward like a lazy ghost. My house was a sanctuary, a canvas of ordered chaos where each object had its place. I wasn't about to let Karen's absurdities disrupt my peace. Instead, I decided to observe, to listen more closely to the symphony of my neighborhood. I took to spending evenings on my porch, wrapped in a woolen blanket, letting the wind whisper its secrets. It was during one of these quiet vigils that I first heard it. A soft groan, a distant rumbling, like a giant's stomach growling. The sound was faint, almost lost in the rustle of leaves and the chirping of crickets, but unmistakably there. It seemed to rise and fall like the tide, a rhythmic pulse that did not belong to my home. Curiosity piqued. I followed the sound, tracing its origin through the neatly trimmed hedges and manicured lawns. It was Karen's house, the grandest in the neighborhood, with its white columns and red brick facade. From somewhere deep within, the rumbling grew louder, more insistent, echoing off the walls like an accusation. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. The noise wasn't a phantom haunting my home. It was a specter from Karen's own domain. The realization was a sudden burst of sunlight on a cloudy day, illuminating a path forward. I knew I had to be careful. Karen's power was not to be underestimated, but I had the truth on my side, and a plan began to form. I would need help from someone who understood sound as intimately as I did, someone who could unravel this mystery with precision. A sound engineer. That was the key. A professional who could pinpoint the noise and prove its true origin. I imagined the look on Karen's face when confronted with the evidence, the dawning realization that her own house was the culprit. For now, I would wait. Like a spider in its web, patient and poised, letting the wind carry my plans forward. I felt no rush, only a quiet satisfaction that justice was within reach. Karen had cast her net, but I was ready to turn the tide. The letter arrived on a Monday. Another neatly typed reminder from the HOA, inked with an officious flourish. Karen's signature was at the bottom, her name scrawled like a final judgment. I felt the paper's weight in my hands, heavier than it looked, like a stone thrown from behind a polite mask. This time, an allegation of improperly stored trash bins. Not that mine had ever ventured beyond the confines of their designated space. I imagined Karen, peering through her blinds, the slats casting shadows on her face like a villain from an old film noir. Her gaze was ubiquitous, as if she had enlisted the very wind she despised to carry tales back to her. In the days that followed, the neighborhood simmered with whispers. Karen, the self-appointed guardian of order, had started making rounds. Her presence was a specter, a chill that clung to otherwise sunlit mornings. Sometimes I caught snippets of conversation, carried on the breeze. "Did you hear about the noise?" "She's fining everyone now." Her influence spread like ink on water, suffusing every corner of our community. The rules became absurd. Grass too long by an inch? A friendly reminder. A hose left coiled on a driveway. A stern warning. I watched it unfold. A parade of petty grievances parading as regulation. Karen wielded her pen like a sword, carving new realities with a stroke. Each letter she sent was a pebble, the ripples disturbing the delicate balance of neighborhood civility. Yet, through it all, my resolve was unwavering. I knew the truth. The sound engineer had confirmed what I suspected. The nocturnal symphony of whispers and wails originated not from my dwelling, but from hers. A revelation that tasted like justice, though tinged with irony. I wondered if she could hear it now, the irony echoing back at her from the walls she guarded so fiercely. As the days turned and the sun traced its arc across our little world, the absurdity reached a crescendo. Karen's latest decree involved the color of outdoor decor. Her vision of harmony was a palette of muted tones, as if the world itself needed to be subdued to silence the clamor of her own making. The others began to notice. Murmurs of dissent grew stronger, emboldened by the shared sense of injustice. The community, once content to bow to her whims, started to stir. I saw it in the way they carried themselves, a subtle defiance in their steps, a rebellion cloaked in civility. One evening, as the sky blazed with the golden hues of dusk, Karen's voice pierced the quiet. Her words were sharp, a rebuke disguised as concern. A single line was all it took to slice through the air, leaving a palpable tension in its wake. "This neighborhood used to be peaceful," she said, her voice a lamentation over a lost tranquility of her own making. I watched, silent and thoughtful, as the shadows lengthened. Her words lingered, an irony lost on none but herself. The truth was a seed, planted in the fertile ground of awareness. It would grow, I knew, even if tended only by tenacity and time. The neighborhood had never been particularly lively, but lately there was a certain buzz, a simmering energy, like a kettle just about to whistle. Karen's latest escapade had rippled through our quiet streets, a tale woven with threads of disbelief and schadenfreude. It wasn't every day that someone got fined for the sound of the wind. It was even rarer for that fine to backfire so exquisitely. The engineer's report was thorough, meticulous even, detailing the decibels of rustling leaves and whistling eaves. It painted a picture not of my humble abode, but of her own, where the wind played a symphony through the chimes she so adored. The irony was a sweet melody, one I hummed quietly to myself as I went about my day. It began with furtive glances from neighbors as I walked the dog, nods that seemed heavier with meaning than usual. The paper had circulated, I was sure. The HOA had posted their usual notice on the bulletin board. The report's summary clumsily redacted, but still legible to the determined eye of the curious. The fines had been rescinded, but that wasn't the story everyone was interested in. At home, I sipped my coffee by the window, watching the wind dance through the trees. The air felt charged, as if the very elements were aware of the neighborhood's tension. Occasionally I'd catch a glimpse of Karen through her curtains, a shadow pacing with the restlessness of a caged lioness. Her silence was louder than any confrontation, a vacuum into which rumors and speculations rushed. In the evenings the whispers grew louder, a chorus of speculation that rose like a crescendo around the community center. I imagined her there, amidst the muted murmurs, her facade cracking like old plaster, the veneer of control slipping with every sideways glance. I wondered if Karen felt the weight of it, the collective gaze of a neighborhood once indifferent now scrutinizing every twitch and tick. Did she hear the whispers as I did, like the rustle of dry leaves skittering across pavement? Did she feel the same anticipation, the same charged air that left a taste of ozone on the tongue? The irony did not escape me. The sound of the wind, a force both intangible and inevitable, had turned the tables, shifting the balance of power with an elegance no human hand could orchestrate. It was a force of nature, like justice, like truth, finding its way into the cracks and crevices of our lives. There was a poetic justice here, a symmetry that was almost beautiful, She had sought to wield control, to bend the neighborhood to her will with the precision of a conductor's baton. Yet it was the wind, that unseen maestro, which had composed her downfall. I imagined the conversations at the HOA meetings, where she had once held court with an ironclad agenda. Now, there would be questions, demands for explanations that would scrape against her pride like nails on a chalkboard. Perhaps there would be apologies, though I doubted it. As the days passed, I felt the tension ease, the neighborhood settling back into its usual rhythms. Yet, something had shifted irreversibly. Karen's empire of compliance had been shaken, her authority questioned. The community had found its voice, quiet yet unyielding, a whisper in the wind that promised change. In the end, it was not victory that I savored, but the return to a peaceful coexistence. A community no longer ruled by fear of fines and friction. The wind would continue its song, a reminder of nature's power and the futility of trying to silence it. In the heart of our quiet suburban enclave, where predictable lives unfolded within the neat lines of propriety, Karen had ruled with the iron fist of clipboard authority. Her latest decree had been absurd, a fine levied against me for the sound of wind, an ethereal, invisible force that she claimed emanated from my property. The accusation had been ridiculous, but in Karen's world, every whisper was a declaration of war. I had played my cards with patience, a quiet resistance growing within me like a deep-rooted oak. The sound engineer, an ally more accustomed to concert halls than cul-de-sacs, unraveled the mystery. He was a maestro who could conduct the symphony of suburbia, isolating notes from the orchestra of domesticity. And so, through technical sorcery, the truth was revealed. The sound originated not from my domicile, but from Karen's own fortress of rules. I watched as the evidence was presented, each detail a brushstroke painting a portrait of inconvenient truth. The irony was delicious. A gust of wind had been her undoing, a force she couldn't control or fine. Her smug visage cracked, the mask of authority slipping in the face of undeniable fact. It was a performance worth the silent applause of the neighborhood, a cosmic balancing act righting the scales of justice. The HOA board gathered like somber judges, their expressions carved from the stone of their own reputations. They couldn't ignore the evidence nor the undercurrent of community unrest. To side with Karen now would be to shatter their own credibility. The decision came quietly, a ripple in the pond of our lives. The fine was rescinded, Karen's power diminished. A collective sigh of relief fluttered through the neighborhood like a gentle breeze carrying away the remnants of her reign. As the days passed, Karen's presence became less of a storm and more of a fading cloud. Her attempts to regain control were met with polite indifference. The neighborhood had shifted, the balance restored. We had learned to speak the language of unity, whispers rising together to form a chorus of quiet strength. I watched her retreat, the once commanding figure reduced to a silhouette on the periphery of our shared existence. There was a certain poetry in it, the way nature's elements had conspired to dethrone her. I found myself reflecting on the peculiar justice of it all. It was not revenge I had sought, but equilibrium. A subtle poetic irony that returned the scales of neighborly decency to their rightful balance. And in that equilibrium, we found a new rhythm. The wind, untamed and free, continued its journey across our rooftops, a muse for those willing to listen. It whispered the stories of our victories, of the quiet defiance that had reshaped our world. I breathed in deeply, feeling the crisp air as it filled my lungs, and knew that in this small victory, we had reclaimed not just our neighborhood, but a piece of ourselves. The wind, once a symbol of discord, now sang a melody of newfound harmony. And so, we moved forward, leaving behind the echoes of a battle fought without swords, where the strongest weapon had been the truth woven through the invisible threads of the air.